Around 2,600 years ago, the Sudanese began the third and final phase of their Kushite Pharaonic Empire by moving their capital to the city of Meroe, also known as Barua or Marua. Barua, the ancient name of Sudan or Nubia in its later days, was governed by a dynasty of queen pharaohs, who held the title of kandake, known as Candace by Western scholars. We will explore how Queen Amanirenas defeated the Romans during the latter's attempt to conquer Nubia. Kandake Amanirenas personally led her troops into battle, directly confronting the Romans. Despite losing an eye in combat, she persisted in the war, ultimately driving the Romans out of her country for good. Let's begin with the events that laid the foundation for this fascinating story of not only this female warrior, but other pharaoh queens from Nubia. In 663 BC, the Sudanese, masters of Africa, lost control of Egypt. Despite this significant setback, the kingdom of Kush continued to develop. Barua, an island on the Nile River, located 300 kilometers south of the capital Napata, grew in importance. In 591 BC, facing instability from Egypt and a reduction in arable land in Napata, the Sudanese pharaoh Aspelta, great-grandson of the legendary Taharka, decided to relocate the political center of the country away from the Egyptian border to Barua, where kings had long been elected. Initially, Napata remained the religious capital, and the pharaohs were buried there. However, from the 4th century BC onward, the ruler's remains were laid to rest in Barua. In accordance with African matriarchal tradition, the Kushite king of Barua was chosen from among the sons of the most powerful woman in the royal clan. He ruled alongside his mother, and often ceremonially married his sister to consolidate his power. If the royal wife was not the biological daughter of the queen mother, she was adopted by her, thus inheriting the legitimacy of power. This prominent role of women in Africa served as a springboard for their eventual complete takeover of power in Barua, as we will soon reveal. The council responsible for electing the pharaoh comprised chiefs of clans from major cities, as well as high-ranking officers of the army and administration. The Queen Mother chaired this electoral council. In accordance with African tradition, power was shared between the Royal Mother, equivalent to Isata, also known as Isis, and her son, the King, equivalent to Horo, also known as Horus. In Kush, the Royal Mother held the title of Kandake, referred to as Candace by Western historians. She was the bearer of the royal lineage, the highest authority in the state, the most honored person, the guarantor of national harmony through her feminine nature, the king's primary advisor, and the acting sovereign when he could not reign. Over time, the kandake began to assume the traditional roles of Horus, becoming the head of national policy and the armed forces. They even adopted the titles of Sarah, son of Ra or God, and Nabatawi, master of the two lands, traditionally male titles held by the pharaohs of Egypt. While in Egypt, this practice was limited to a few women, famous being Sobekneferu, Hatshepsut, Tausert. In Sudan, it became customary for the kandake to hold these male titles of Horus. Next, we will examine the military organization of Nubia. The empire was defended by a formidable army known for its soldiers mounted on elephants. Its archers, the most prestigious corps, spread terror among enemies with their astounding precision, often hitting their opponents in the eyes. The army featured a hierarchical structure led by the king or queen, with notable contributions from archers, cavalry, and war elephants. Nubian soldiers were known for their large ox-hide shields and simple yet effective weapons like axes, pikes, and swords. The Kushites excelled in both defensive fortifications and offensive siege tactics, supported by a capable naval force. Their military campaigns, characterized by strategic prowess and rigorous training. For example, the powerful Persian emperor Cambyses II, who invaded Egypt in the 6th century BC, dared to venture towards Sudan, but was violently repelled by the pharaoh of Barua, who had previously warned him of the invincibility of his archers. Similarly, the Arabs, after conquering Egypt in the 7th century AD, met the same fate during their initial advancement on Barua. We will leave the details for a future video. first kandake to assume full power was Shanaktakete. Shanaktakete broke new ground by not only ruling as the Queen Mother, but also taking on the full responsibilities of a sovereign, including commanding the army and governing the state. Her reign marked a significant shift in the role of women in Kushite society, demonstrating their capability to lead both politically and militarily. The greatest candaces emerged during the early Christian era. In 31 BC, when Rome, the world's most powerful state, invaded Egypt and attempted to conquer Sudan, the candaces rose to prominence in Nubia. Kandake Amanirenas was so sovereign that almost nothing is known about her husband. These were the jewels of Kandake Amanirenas. The two bracelets depict her adorned with the wings of Maat, and notably, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, signifying her status as a true pharaoh. Kandake Amanitore was politically equal to her husband Natakamani. This is a depiction of Kandake Amanitore. In the history of Africa, particularly within one of its most dominant civilizations, women had never held such high stature and power. Amanirenas became head of state upon the death of her husband, Emperor Teriketas, in 40 BCE. Following African matriarchal tradition, she rightfully assumed full power over this nation, which had given rise to Pharaonic Egypt 3,300 years earlier. Her name, Amanirenas, means Amani is her name, with Amani being the Nubian name for Imana or Amen or Amun, the singular god of Africa. After the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Octavian became the undisputed ruler of Rome and its territories. As Augustus Caesar, he gained control of Egypt, turning it into a Roman province governed by a chief magistrate under his direct authority. To the south of Egypt lay the kingdom of Kush, outside the Roman Empire. Queen Amanirenas ruled over Meroe, the capital of the Kushite dynasty in northeast Africa. When Emperor Augustus imposed a tax on the Kushites, Queen Amanirenas and her son, Akinidad, refused to honor the Roman tax. Following the suicide of the first chief magistrate of Roman Egypt, a new chief magistrate, Aelius Gallus, was appointed and subsequently ordered by Augustus to conquer Arabia and Ethiopia. Taking advantage of his absence during the campaign against Arabia, Kandake Amanirenas and her son, Crown Prince Akinidad, launched an attack in 24 BC. They defeated the Roman cohorts at Syene, modern-day Aswan, Philae, and Elephantine, returning with prisoners and booty, including several statues of Augustus. In retaliation, Roman General Petronius, following Augustus's orders, led a force of 10,000 infantry and 800 cavalry against 30,000 Kushite men in Syene. The Kushites fought, using large, oblong shields made of raw ox hide and simple weaponry such as axes, pikes, and swords. The Kushites were driven out of Aswan by General Gaius Petronius, who was serving as the Roman magistrate in Egypt. According to a detailed report by Strabo, Roman troops advanced far south, eventually reaching Napata. There were several pitched battles between the Roman forces and Amanirenas. Her son, Prince Akinidad, died during one of these battles. Queen Amanirenas erected a stela to honor Akinidad in the city of Kasr Ibrim in the year 24 BC. After the death of her son, Amanirenas withdrew from planned peace talks and continued the war against the Roman legions. During the war, Amanirenas lost an eye, which only made her more courageous. Roman governor Gaius Petronius referred to her as the one-eyed Candace. After gaining ground on the Nubians, and later realizing the futility of their efforts to conquer Nubia, the Romans withdrew to the north. They, however, established a garrison at Kasr Ibrim, marking it the new southern border of the Roman Empire. During the Roman occupation of Kasr Ibrim, they defaced and broke the stela of Akinidad, which Kandake Amanirenas had previously erected. This shows the extent of contempt the Romans had for the Nubians, who had become a real thorn in their flesh. The Meroites, also known as Nubians, resisted Roman occupation, and by 22 BC, they successfully retook Kasr Ibrim from the Romans. In 21 BC, a peace treaty was concluded between Augustus himself and Meroite envoys on the island of Samos. The peace treaty was remarkably favorable to the Meroats. The Romans evacuated the southern part of the 30-mile strip, including Primus, and the Meroats were exempted from paying tribute. However, the Romans maintained control over the Dodekashoinos as a military border zone, with the frontier now lying near Maharaka. This arrangement persisted until the end of the 3rd century AD, and relations between Meroe and Roman Egypt remained generally peaceful during this period. In the aftermath of the war with Meroe, also known as Nubia, Emperor Augustus commissioned the construction of a remarkable temple at Dender, Nubia. This temple, with its intricate reliefs and inscriptions, ostensibly depicts Augustus worshipping the local Nubian deities. However, it pays particular homage to two brothers, Pahor and Padizi, believed to be sons of a local Nubian elite ruler who tragically drowned in the Nile River and were subsequently deified. Rituals performed at Dendur in Augustus's name for these brothers were contemporaneous with similar rituals at Sayala near Abu Simbel. Nubian religious practices in these rock-cut shrines persisted into the Roman period at both Sayala and Dendur. This bronze head of Augustus, now housed in the British Museum, was discovered buried in a temple at Meroe. According to the writer Strabo, statues of Augustus were erected in Egyptian towns near the first cataract of the Nile at Aswan. In 24 BC, an invading Meroite army captured many of these statues as booty. This particular head of Augustus was buried beneath the steps of a temple dedicated to victory in Meroe. It appears that the head, having been severed from its statue, was deliberately placed there to remain permanently beneath the feet of the Meroites. A wall painting in this temple depicted several prisoners, including a Roman, emphasizing the symbolic triumph over their adversaries. The Hammadab stela of Amanirenas and Akinidad was discovered at Hammadab in 1912 by John Garstang in an unexcavated settlement south of the center of Meroe city. It is the longest and best-known royal inscription from the 1st and 2nd centuries BC, engraved in Meroitic text and found in the temples of Napata and Meroe. 4 inscriptions identify Amanirenas as queen, Candace, and ruler. The Daka Graffito, the Teritekas oval stela from the Isis temple in Meroe city. The stela records military campaigns, depicting the queen standing before Amun on the left half, and the goddess Mut on the right half in the scenes represented on the lunette. Below these scenes, the queen is shown in a triumphal stance, with 10 bound enemies prostrated before her on the frieze. As Africans and people of African descent, we need to be aware of the accomplishments of Nubians. These are the highlights of today's video presentation. Just before the birth of Christ, several powerful Meroitic queens, known as kandakes, ruled Nubia Kush. Among them, Kandake Amanirenas and her son, Prince Akinidad, led the Meroitic army to keep the Romans out of Nubia Kush. It is worth noting that Meroitic Kush never became part of the Roman Empire, a testament to their resilience and strength. The formidable Kandake Amanirenas, a black woman, greatly impressed classical writers from Europe who often mistook the royal title Kandake or Candace for a personal name, further cementing her legendary status in history. Stay tuned for more exciting videos where we'll delve deeper into Nubian history, uncovering fascinating stories from Africa. Thank you so much for watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts and any questions you have in the comments below. Your engagement helps us create more content that you love. Until next time, remain black and proud.